It is 1 2 1 2. Anna. Okay, I think it's okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna start, huh?
The kids of Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
You could just see cuts happening.
What did that, Lieutenant?
I don't know.
What has the coroner got to say? He's in the jar and puking since he saw it.
They're gonna kill me for sure.
Did you do it?
There was somebody else there.
He was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
No one knows where it came from or who it will visit next.
Nancy? There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
no one will survive. From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
I'm gonna talk Slovene now and then I'm gonna talk English. Okay. Torej, dame in gospodje, mi s televizijo Arena se nahajamo na Grosnonovem filmskem festivalu v Ljutomeru in jaz ne morem verjeti, kdo je tu zraven mene. Malo me je strah, I'm a little bit scared, ne? Because this guy is really scary. No, I'm awake, don't kill me, I'm fucking awake. No, don't do it. Torej, jaz sem po konci in ne vem, kaj počne, ne? Skratka, z mano, dame in gospodje, je sloviti Robert Englund, znan seveda kot Freddy Krueger iz serije filmov Mora v ulici Brestu in še marsikaj drugega, o čem bomo midva danes govorila. Skratka, jaz sem zelo vesel, da smo se znašli tu in da ga imamo mi tukaj pri sebi in najbolje je, da mi začnemo s temle intervjujem. So, Mr. Robert Englund, the super famous Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street and many more movies. We're gonna talk about them also. I must tell you, like I told your friend Jack Shoulder, who directed part 2, you were a big part of my childhood, my teenage days, because Nightmare on Elm Street was really big thing here in Slovenia also. I watch you in many other different movies, but Nightmare on Elm Street is the most famous one. I think it was eight films starting with first one.
It's a very happy accident in my career that I did the 8 movies of the franchise, and the way they were spaced out, I grabbed a teenage audience, an adolescent audience, and then I would get their younger siblings, their brothers and sisters, sometimes parents, sometimes step-parents. So I had this accumulative audience building during the 1980s and 1990s, all the way up to 2004 with Freddy versus Jason. So it was 20 years, and now I have almost 3 generations of fans. Just a blessing because of the way that the horror part of my career spaced out.
Let's start with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. You killed Johnny Depp. This is the epic thing. You were the first guy.
Killed him real good.
Yes, you killed him in the bed. Yeah. But tell me, how you got the part? Why Wes Craven choose you? How was your experience with all that mask, scary stuff, child killer and all that? Tell me about this.
Well, I think Wes Craven wanted a big man, a stunt man, originally, or perhaps it was the producer Bob Shea, but the casting director Annette Benson, she had just screen tested me for many roles in a National Lampoon movie. She was a big fan, so she brought me in and talked me up to Wes. And when I met Wes, I took a cigarette from my ashtray in my car, and I put a little saliva on the ash, and I made gray circles under my eyes. It looked very real, very natural. And then I took car grease from the engine of my old Datsun convertible, and I greased my hair back. And when I went in to meet Wes, I buttoned my shirt up all the way like a convict.
I'm getting scared.
Yeah. And I when I looked at him, I didn't blink. I just stared like that, and I kept my face was elongated. I had a lot of forehead, and I imagined myself in a makeup more like Nosferatu, because I didn't know what Freddy was going to look like. But I think playing that staring game with Wes, and then Wes would say that he felt I was the only person that understood what he was trying to do with Nightmare on Elm Street. And when he told me the story during the interview, I loved it. You know, Wes is a raconteur. He's a good storyteller. He's a writer and a director. And I was captivated, but I didn't blink. You know, I kept staring, and I understood what he was going to do. And I shared a couple of ideas with him that I had about Fred Krueger. And the next thing I know, I had the part. But it may be also that Annette Benson, the casting director, was really fighting for me. You know, she was really in my corner.
But I think that you are the only one of that horror icons who played the same character, I think, 8 times, because the other guys like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees was just a mask, just a body, né? But Freddy Krueger is acting, is real acting, similar, I think, to Doug Bradley in Hellraiser. Yes.
Well, Doug is a friend, Doug Bradley, and Doug's a wonderful, terrific actor. I just recommended him for a role that I felt that if I had played it, my history would have hurt the character. But yeah, I think what happened was they tried to use another actor, and it was terrible. I've heard that story, but I was sort of protected from all of those rumors and gossip, and I never needed to make a lot of money in the first couple of the movies because I was on a hit television show called V, and that was taking up most of my time. And that was the first time I became an international actor, and that was the first time when audiences put my name to my face. So I was sort of reveling and enjoying all of that at the time. But I really believe that it was a combination of Wes liking me and Annette Benson fighting for me that finally, ultimately got me the part.
But what was your favorite kill in all of that Nightmare films? We got all of them here. I think this is part 1. This is part 1. This is part 2 with Jack Shoulder directing. Yes.
I think my favorite part,
which
is in part 6.
Freddy's Dead, Final Nightmare. Really?
And I think, oh look, there's Alice Cooper playing my father.
Yes,
Alice,
stepfather.
Yes, stepfather. But here's I think it's this one. It's the boy in the hearing aid. And I like it because he's suffering from a disability, but Freddy doesn't care. Freddy's an equal opportunity killer and not politically correct in any way. And I have actors who have disabilities. They might be in a wheelchair or something, and they don't want to just play saints and good guys. They want to play characters too that live and die and can be evil and play villains. And I think the fact that that's such a politically incorrect kind of kill, but yet it shows the true nature of Freddy's cruelty. It's one of my favorite. But I think the classic kill of all the films is actually in the first one, which is the death of Tina prematurely.
Naughty girl.
And being dragged across the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, but this part 6, Freddy's Dead, Friday Nightmare, was very funny film, and Johnny Depp also made a comeback. I think it's very funny film. When I saw it first, I didn't like it that much when I was young. When I saw it later, it is, I think, underrated.
Well, we intentionally made Nightmare 6. We pushed the envelope, pushed the edges of what we were doing, because we were so part of the popular culture. We felt we had to acknowledge that, and we almost treated it. I remember there's one scene in it where I'm pushing a little wagon, and I was literally channeling Bugs Bunny in a Warner Brothers cartoon.
As a boy, he was always different. No one understood him.
You ready for it, boy? It's time to take your medicine.
Thank you, sir.
No one could control him.
Go inside, honey.
But now, it's a new beginning. The beginning of the end for Freddy.
Every town has an Elm Street. No! Screaming while the bus is in motion! Get your mind or go for it. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too. Oh, yeah.
We're gonna have to hit him with everything we've got.
Now I'm playing with power.
We're in Twin Peaks here. It's gotta be me and him.
You wanna live?
Maggie, watch out!
What's with kids today, huh?
Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare.
Great graphics.
They've saved the best for last.
So we were doing that on purpose. And then we sort of returned to the mythological meta-terror in part 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, that was really crazy film, because you, the actor Robert Englund, and the character Freddy Krueger in the same scene, same film. It was crazy. But you're also co-scripted and co-directed that part 7.
Well, no, not really. I contributed some, but the whole subtext and subplot with Heather Langenkamp, that really happened to her. She really had a stalker in real life. And I collect art, but I'm not an artist. So Wes wanted to bring these elements in, and it was a successful movie. But then Wes did the Scream franchise. And after the Scream movie, the first Scream movie came out, Nightmare 7 had already gone to DVD. We had already gone to DVD, and then we became a huge success and a big hit on DVD because the audiences had embraced Scream, and they were able now to understand the sort of deconstructed meta elements that were part of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 7.
Something new back then, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but When you thought about Freddy Krueger, he was so iconic, so big. I think even Fat Boys, the rap group, made a song, Are You Ready for Freddy? And you rapping there, ne?
Guys, this is my lawyer.
How you doing? What's up, man? Now, Mark, the terms of your Uncle Frederick's will state that you must spend one night in his house in order to inherit his estate. Now, it is my duty as executor to ensure that you fulfill his request.
Do you mean all I have to do is spend one night here and the place is mine? No problem.
No problem? Yo, let me ask you a question. Who is this Uncle Frederick anyway?
Well, he's from a part of my family we never mentioned.
I won't mention any of your family.
Yeah, let's just get this gig over with. Come on.
Freddy Krueger's the name. You know my game. Elm Street's the place. If you got the time, listen to this. You'll bust the ride.
Fred Krueger the myth, or Fred Krueger the man. It doesn't matter because I'm still rapping about him, understand?
So sit back, Jack, I'm gonna bust the rhyme. Grab a hold of your face, it's Krueger time.
It's time for Freddy. See, I'm a popular guy. If you don't know yet, you're gonna find out why.
Man, whoa, please with Elm Street late one night. I'm looking like I go town, no one in sight.
With the hat like a vagabond.
Feel like a flasher.
It's the big time.
Fred Krueger.
King Crimson.
Trying to find a girl, the fit is fancy.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times dancing.
All the people sleeping, snoozing and dreaming.
Krueger's on the corner of Elm Street scheming.
Huh, you better wake up and listen to this.
Because the blaze of Freddy Krueger's hands will miss.
Don't fall asleep. What I am, and Freddy is a dream. The natural fear. When night comes, stay away from the dark. Walk out, but Freddy will bust your heart. 2 a.m. and Freddy is a dream. The natural fear. When night comes, stay away from the dark. Krueger, Mom. Fred Krueger.
I'm here.
Even in part 3, the Dream Warriors failed.
And Mr. Big Time Freddy Krueger prevailed.
It was his proud time, but you'll never forget
What he did to the girl with the TV set.
But you can't stop Freddy looking cool as ice.
Come right back at ya to slash and slang.
Like a Jitsu blade, like a blend of hill blitz.
Fred Krueger, put it on the wrist.
3 a.m.
Young ones, old. Your mamas too. And if you don't watch out, I'm gonna thrill you too. So my advice to you is to stay ready. Cause you know who's back? Freddy. You see, my name is Freddy, and I'm here to say I'll wrap you up and take you away. Feel like you're tired and ready for bed. Don't fall asleep or you'll wake up dead.
It was phenomenon.
Not just the Fat Boys. The first hit the first rap hit about me
Will Smith, Jazzy Jeff
was sung by Will Smith.
Yes.
And DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Didn't
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. Didn't make it in the film. No? But in Fat Boy's video, you were there in person. No?
And I also did a video with the rock group Dokken.
So Freddy was, I think, bigger than Jason and bigger than Michael Myers, or am I wrong?
No, Freddy is, of all the franchises, Freddy's the number one. They're going to probably reboot it again. You know, they'll probably remake all of them again. So
I thought that I heard that Michael Bay was preparing some reboot, but it didn't happen.
Well, they did remake part one, and I think what happened is New Line Cinema was wrapped into Time Warner, and at that time, Michael Bay and Platinum Dunes were thinking about rebooting the entire franchise. But when Wes Craven died, the Craven estate has certain rights, I believe, to part 1 and part 3, and then Time Warner also has certain rights, so they have to negotiate those before they go on to reboot any of them. I would love to be invited to play the psychologist in part 3 in Dream Warriors. It was played by a wonderful actress's mother, Amy Irving, from The Fury, and Amy Irving from Carrie.
Yes.
Her mother, Priscilla Pointer, played the sort of reluctant therapist for the group encounter with all of the kids that had the same dream, and she was very skeptical about that. And I think it would be fun for audiences if I perhaps could return to the franchise as an old actor that I am, and play one of the doctors who's skeptical of the collective nightmare. Audiences like to see those kind of cameos in reboots.
Because you also did a cameo in Scream. You played the janitor with Freddy's dress.
They bring Freddy. They hide him in various things. Yes.
But did you like that new version from 2010 with Jackie Earle Haley? My problem with that film is that it's too serious. Freddy is a horror, but it's dark humor, black humor, and this was, for my opinion, too serious.
But Wes Craven taught me a really valuable rule, and it's not just horror. It can be in a dramatic film. It could even be in an action film. But if you are just scaring people, or you're just burdening them with depressing emotions, whether it's a film like Amour, or a film about the Holocaust, or a horror film, you need to have some humor, so the audience can relieve their emotional tension between the screen and their heart. Otherwise, they start laughing at you instead of with you, because they can't take that much emotion that long. And so we had the release valve of Freddy's personality, and he almost, winks at the audience. He's almost looking through the fourth wall, through the screen sometimes, commenting on the popular culture and on the habits and the weaknesses and the flaws that his potential victims have. He's unapologetic, and by doing that, the audience laughs with Freddy, and then they can be set up and be scared over and over and over again.
And that actors who appeared in all that nightmare films, which one do you remember the most being the coolest, or you didn't like it, you hate it? For we said in this part 3, we got Patricia Arquette, we got Lawrence Fishburne, and also famous directors, the beginners when they made nightmare films and then become great directors like Chuck Russell, I think Rennie Harlin, Stephen Hopkins.
All of them, yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, I remember being very exhausted before part 5, and I went to a Thai restaurant near MGM to meet Stephen Hopkins, and I was so tired. I'd just done part 4 and a television series with Mariska Hargitay, and I went to meet Stephen, and he took a napkin from the table in the Thai restaurant, and he began to storyboard some of the ideas he had for Part 5, The Dream Child. And Steven, in real life, is very handsome. Very handsome. He was dating beautiful models back then. But he also could cartoon his storyboards. And the sort of latent teenage boy that's alive in me still, I love guys that can draw. You know, I love the graphic novel artists. And I was so impressed that I said, well, you know, I'll sign on. I'll do Part 5. And, you know, I think Steven was like the coolest looking director. He could be an actor. He could be a leading man. And of course, he went on to do other very famous projects. I think most recently, the Showtime or HBO series Shameless. I think he's involved with that. But Steven, very, very smart, but he looks like a movie star. He looks like a movie star from the 1940s or early 50s, you know. And I was very impressed with Steven. But working with Wes, you also had a writer. He was not only a director, he was a writer. So any problems you had with the dialogue or anything, he could fix them. I did a TV series with Wes, wonderful cult television series. Jack Coleman was the other star, who's so wonderful. He's now on Westworld. And Jack Coleman was the star of Lost, the show Lost. But Jack Coleman and I did a show called Nightmare Cafe for Wes Craven. And that's the first time I ever saw a laptop computer, and Wes could instantly fix the dialogue for you and show it to you, and you could see it, learn it, and then we just go back and action, you know, and go back and but it's great having somebody that can direct you and also understands the actor and can fix the dialogue as well.
Nice. Now we're gonna go to the beginning of your career. You started in 1974, I think, with Jean-Michael Vincent, the great Jean-Michael Vincent, and you also started in his Big Wednesday. So how was your memory of that guy? He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. He lost all the money and all the career. So how was it, and why you think he got lost? He was so handsome, so beautiful, real movie star.
He was. I was his wingman on the first movie we did, playing his best friend and buddy. But we would go out driving the old-fashioned cars and go to the borders of the counties in the south where we were filming to get moonshine, whiskey. And Jan, being with Jan was like hanging out with James Dean or Elvis Presley.
Yes.
Just amazing. Or Johnny Depp, maybe, I don't know. But Jan was a true artist, literally, like Jan could draw and paint. And I think he wanted to be a musician, but he was an artist, but I don't think he respected acting. I don't think Jan ever respected acting. I think he thought it was kind of a silly thing. But of course, he was an international movie star, one of the biggest stars of the 70s. His agent, Dick Clayton, had let all of his clients go in 1970 and kept two. 1970, kept two clients. You know who they were?
No.
Burt Reynolds and Jan-Michael Vincent. And they became the two biggest stars of the 1970s. And my theory is that Jan and his beautiful wife separated, and that really disappointed him and distressed him. And then he was doing a successful television series called Airwolf.
Yes.
And his double was killed. And they were very close. His double was from a famous stunt family of stuntmen. And I think that kind of hurt Jan too. And it increased his drinking. And I think that's what happened there. I ran into Jan a couple of times. I did some radio with Jan. I ran into him in my hometown, Laguna Beach, at a wonderful saloon, an old bar, an old pub. And he was still beautiful. But I noticed that his teeth, there was something wrong with his teeth. And it really broke my heart. But he had a lovely friend helping him and taking care of him then, and I just wished him the best, and rest in peace, Jan.
Okay. And then you got small parts in movies like Stay Hungry with Jeff Bridges, Sally Field, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Star is Born, Chris Christopherson, Barbara Streisand. What the hell was that? It was very nice.
Well,
great things.
People forget that during the 1970s,
you were a serious actor.
I was what they call an A-list actor, and I was always playing the best friends. But you have to understand, in contemporary terms, the best friend parts don't last as long as they used to in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. The best friend could be an older man. A friend of Jimmy Stewart or a friend of John Wayne could be an old man, or a friend of Henry Fonda could be an old man. And so I stopped doing the sidekicks, the best friend roles, and I moved into bad guys for a while.
Under the knife I surrender. Innocence yours to consume. You cut it away, and you fill me up with hate. Into the silence you send me, into the fire consumed. You thought I'd forget, but it's all
because I wanted to explore playing villains, and it turned out to be the right thing to do. I loved horror movies as a child, and I'd sort of suppressed that. And because I was a stage actor and I was very serious and I was doing Shakespeare, and I became kind of a snob, and I forgot my roots, that as a child, how magical the horror movies were to me. And when I finally did succeed internationally as a horror star, I promised myself, because the audience was so supportive of me, that I would do at least one horror movie a year for the fans. And it's turned out to be a blessing, because now I've graduated into, I always play the mad doctor or the mad scientist, or the old man that tells the story, or the old priest, that knows the where the evil being lives,
Yes,
and those are the kind of things I'm doing now,
But the funny thing is, I read somewhere that you were in audition for Han Solo and Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Is it really, or this is some urban legend?
Well, no. What happens is the internet. The internet is not based on facts or truth. It's based on rumor and opinion. So there's a basis to that story. And it's actually a great story that I tell, and I'll tell you now. And I call it my Once Upon a Time in Hollywood story.
Yes.
A long time ago, in the middle 1970s in Hollywood, 3 people hung out together every day in a beautiful apartment by the famous architect Richard Schindler in the Hollywood Hills. And they were Janice Fisher, who wrote The Lost Boys, Robert Englund, who would go on to become Freddy Krueger, and Mark Hamill, who would eventually become Luke Skywalker. And Mark was a big television star. I was a movie actor, and Janice was a screenwriter. I went on an audition. I begged my agent to get me into an audition for Apocalypse Now. I wanted to play the chef. The chef was played by the great actor Freddie Forrest, and he has that great line, "Fucking tiger." So I wanted to audition for that part, and they said, "No, you're too young." So I went to a thrift shop, a used clothing store, and I bought an old pair of green jeans, and I bought some combat boots, and I bought a military shirt. And I had very long blonde hair, and I tied it back. And I went in, I had dog tags on, Army dog tags. And I went into the audition for the surfer, because I'm a surfer. And I was too old for that part. But they did audition me, but somebody there said, across the hall, Georgie Lucas is doing a sci-fi movie, a space movie. And they might think you're right for, they might think you're right for that. So the casting people marched me across the hall, and they had a little camera like this. They didn't even use their live camera. They took my picture with a Polaroid, and that was it. But what I think was happening then, the original Han Solo, they wanted someone older, because they wanted him like an uncle to Luke, someone older and wiser, like the uncle that comes for Christmas and lets the teenage boy smoke the marijuana cigarette, or have some beer.
Yes.
The cool uncle. And I believe that Tom Selleck had just turned them down. I'm not sure, but they never thought I was right for Han Solo. I did not read. They just took a Polaroid of me, Polaroid picture. But as I left the office, I saw the audition scene for a character called Luke Skywalker. And I just love the name, Luke Skywalker. And I folded it and put it in my pocket. I went across the street to the bar, across the street, the famous Hollywood bar, the Formosa, a Chinese restaurant with pictures of everybody on the wall. And I was sitting under a picture of Steve McQueen, and I read the audition piece for Luke Skywalker. I said, Mark Hamill, my buddy Mark, might be right for this. Stuck it back in my pocket, got in my old convertible, drove up into the Hollywood Hills, went to my apartment, And there was Mark's cowboy boots out in front of the door. You know, we took our shoes off and left them outside. And I said, "Oh, Mark's here." I walked in, and Mark, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Mark was watching. He loved the old reruns of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the Bob Newhart Show. And we would watch those, and we would drink Heineken beer, and we would call our agent on the phone. And I walked in, and I remember giving Mark the sides and saying, "Mark, I really think you're right." And we both loved George Lucas. American Graffiti was one of our favorite films. And Mark got on the phone and called his agent. Now, I think Mark's agent believes she'd already submitted him for the role, but I don't think Mark knew about it. And he called up and told his agent about it, and he got in for the part, and the rest is history.
Very nice. And then you made some first horror film with Top Hopper, ne? Eaten Alive, and then 2 or 3 more movies. So besides Wes Craven, Top Hopper was your favorite horror director, huh?
Well, you know, they're both gone now. Wes has passed away, and so has Tobin. And I mean, I worked in Israel with Tob. I worked in Canada. I worked in Hollywood. We did a great movie for Showtime, Masters of Horror. Great script, Dance of the Dead, and one Jonathan Tucker is wonderful in that. And I did a nasty little horror movie for him back in the late 70s called Eaten Alive.
Yes.
Original title was Death Trap.
If you were one of the millions of moviegoers who were electrified by the unbearable suspense and sheer terror of Jaws, get ready for Eaten Alive. Created by Tobe Hooper, maker of the screen sensation The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Marty Rustin presents a new horror classic, Eaten Alive. Into this house of terror comes a handful of unsuspecting innocents.
Hello?
What happens to these people in Eaten Alive will give you the most chilling, terrifying 90 minutes you ever spent in a theater. Marty Rustin presents Eaten Alive. Mel Ferrer, Carolyn Jones, Stuart Whitman, Neville Brand. Get ready for Eaten Alive, a new horror classic.
Which is also the title of a Broadway play.
Alligator eats people.
Yes, me and I've made several films with giant alligators. It's in my blood. Anyway, but that cast is full of interesting people. Mel Ferrer, Audrey Hepburn's husband. Stuart Whitman, who extraordinary actor. One of my favorite childhood movies, Sands of the Kalahari, where he fights the monkeys. He survives. And Carolyn Jones, the Oscar-winning actress Carolyn Jones, played the madam of the brothel. And Marilyn Burns from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And one of my favorite all-time genre actors, William Findlay, who was in Phantom of the Paradise, and he's in The Fury, and he's in one of my all-time favorite horror films, 1974, Brian De Palma, Sisters. Check it out.
Yes.
Brilliant film. Great mixture of comedy, horror. and a brilliant performance. By the great actress who played Lois Lane in Superman, Margot Kidder. Yeah.
Kidder, yes.
Oh, she's so beautiful and young, and oh, it's creepy. Siamese twins. Oh God, Siamese twins creep me out. But anyway, yeah. So that working with Tobe over the years, many experiences that were just memories that I'll have forever.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was a teenager, 1989, Phantom of the Opera. Robert Englund starring as the Phantom.
Some stories have so great a power that with each new generation, they are reborn.
It was a feeling, a passion.
But it had to come from somewhere. This was no phantom. Ghosts do not skin their victims. This is the work of an artist.
We will make music that the world will love forever. Take the last step to me.
You are the angel. You are my voice.
I feel him and I hear him. I don't want this feeling ever to go away.
The Phantom of the Opera. The all-time horror classic.
The Phantom is real. It has a name.
Is now a major motion picture.
You love the music. I am the music.
A lot of people are dead, Mr. Dutton, and the murderer is in your house. Someone is doing murder in Christine Day's name.
Our souls are one.
Robert Englund is
You're him, aren't you?
the Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom of the Opera. Only love and music are forever.
It was, I think, underrated flick. I think it was a good. If I watch it today, I think it was underrated back then, and you were great as the Phantom.
Well, I'm proud of that film because Dwight Little and I, it was our goal to make it retro, like a Hammer film.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed it from the Paris Opera to the London Opera. And that way we could enter the world adjacent of Jack the Ripper kind of horror, and Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Herbert Lom, Hammer film with a saturated color and everything. But that's a great cast. That film has a great cast, and it looks good. And horror fans and genre fans should watch it just to see Robert Englund kill Bill Nighy from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
But it's a great looking film, and we wanted to return the horror to Phantom of the Opera, because at that time Phantom of the Opera was just thought of as this big musical, in London and New York, with dancing chorus boys. Oh, it's the Phantom of the Opera and he's coming to get you. And we wanted to return the horror and the gore and the violence to it, because people forget Phantom of the Opera, written by Gaston Leroux, was the #1 book in the world, and it was translated into just about as many languages as the Bible, and he was sort of the Stephen King of his day, and it's gone through many incarnations. But I'm very proud, because when you mention my Phantom of the Opera, you have to think of Claude Rains and Lon Chaney and Julian Sands, and you have to think of other actors that played it, Jack Palance, wonderful actors that have essayed the role, and so I'm in the same room with them, and I'm just very honored to be one of the actors.
You did brilliant job.
Thank you.
It's my opinion. And you were so big back then that 1988 you made your first movie as a director called 976 Evil. So it was your first movie. I think it was good. It was good.
Well, it's strange. I have talents as a director, but they may be more for the stage than the big screen. However, if I am honest with myself, I would love to do a little independent film, but I'm probably not the best choice as a genre director. I'll tell you why. I would love to direct a movie like Tender Mercies, the little Robert Duvall film about the country western singer. That's the kind of film that I'd be best for. However, because I love the genre and because I respect horror, they always want to go to me. My problem is I get really scared. I get a knot in my stomach, apprehensive and nervous about the special effects. Someone like our friend Jack Shoulder, who's sitting over here, that doesn't unnerve him because Jack's also a film editor and he knows he can fix it. But I hear that clock tick-tock, tick-tock, and money being spent, and I'm always nervous when I'm shooting a big special effects day. I can't sleep the night before, and I don't like to put myself through that. But 976 Evil has the wonderful Stephen Jeffries from Fright Night, the Oscar-winning actress from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, Sandy Dennis, and one of my co-stars from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Leslie Dean. I don't think she's on this DVD, but Leslie Dean is a wonderful actress. I discovered her on an episode of 21 Jump Street with Johnny Depp. She played a Catholic school girl, and she's in Nightmare 6, and she's the star of 976 Evil, and she's just wonderful. She's kind of like a bit of a Jodie Foster type.
Out of darkness and into light comes your horoscope. Push 666 for your horoscope now.
I am the guide to your destiny. Your prize lies only a short distance away. Claim it.
That shall not steal! That's where my sister made her mistake with you. You know, there was no discipline.
Oh, the hell!
You can still change, boy. There is still time. Mama, it's raining fish! Raining fish from the sky!
I thought I told you not to tell anybody about last night.
Mama said we were blessed by the Lord.
Your problem's not nearly as bad as it seems. Meet the girl of your dreams.
Let him go!
Do you want the power now?
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You think I'm some kind of wimp, don't you?
It's time we ended this.
You don't end Armageddon. We're going to hell!
But who did you meet on during making this film? You meet someone special. You meet someone special.
This guy does his homework.
Yes.
Not many people know that.
Yes.
No,
yes.
I met the love of my life.
Yeah. And her name is Nancy.
Nancy, set decorator.
Nightmare on
Well,
first bill. Nancy, I'm your boyfriend now. So what to say about that?
Well, you know, I mean, we're, you know, the Europeans, all of you, you know, you all know your Freud so well that you all think there's something wrong with me because Nancy, my leading lady, Nancy, is also my leading lady in real life, Nancy.
And you leak it through the phone. You leak it through the phone.
Yes, I know. But no, Nancy was the set decorator, and thank God, because I'm the guy that has trouble changing a tire on a car, and my wife can do all that, and she's beautiful, and so I let her fix everything. But yeah, she's my soulmate and my helpmate through life, and she loves coming, you know, to the film festivals all over the world. I'm here at this show. people think I'm here because of Jack, and they think I'm here because of Loris Kirchi. But actually, I'm here because Nancy did all the research and said, "Oh, you're going to love it. It's the wine country. It's so beautiful." And we realized, because we know the area near Lake Balaton in Hungary, which isn't that far, and I've worked in Zagreb, which isn't that far before. And I heard, I had friends when I worked in Zagreb that used to drive north to the Croatian side of the border where their wine country is. So I knew this is a beautiful part of the continent, and I'm just so happy to be here. But Nancy, my wife, not Nancy, my leading lady,
yes.
Nancy is the one that really sold me on coming here.
Very nice. And then I read your resume. Two things were very interesting. Knight Rider with David Hasselhoff and Walker the Texas Ranger with Chuck Norris. And my question is, could Chuck Norris take Freddy Krueger down?
I don't know. Chuck's pretty mean.
Yeah, I know.
And I worked with Chuck's brother too, who's great. He had just become a grandfather, I think, when I worked with Chuck, and he looked great. I mean, all muscles, young looking, handsome. But he was, very happy about that. And the show had just been picked up for an extra season. So all the young people on that crew were very happy because they would be able to perhaps afford a house or have enough money if they were going to start having a family. And so it was a very happy set when I worked on it. But I had to shoot a 357 Magnum out of a moving car, and it's such a kick on that gun. I remember that, and I remember I had to hang onto a helicopter as it flew away, and Chuck had to drag me off of that. So I got to fight a little bit with Chuck. I've had some interesting fight scenes. Linda Hamilton from Terminator.
Yes.
I did an episode of the TV series Chuck with Linda, and we got to throw down a little bit. It's fighting with a girl, fighting with a woman, but I was.
Linda is tough.
Linda's tough.
Very tough.
Linda's tough. But we were talking earlier about my friend Jack Coleman from my series with Wes Craven, who also starred in many other great shows. But Jack's now on Westworld, and I saw him fighting Thandie Newton. So the next time I see Jack, I'm going to say, "Well, you got to fight Thandie Newton. I got to fight Linda Hamilton."
Okay. And another interesting film you did, small part, of course, 1999, The Adventures of Fort Fairlane with the infamous Andrew Dice Clay, which was directed by Eddie Harlin, who made Nightmare 4. How was this Andrew Dice Clay? He was really crazy guy, and then he fucked up his career, I think, because he was too loud.
No, actually, what happened to Andrew? He's doing great now. And he did Woody Allen movies, and he's his own a show on HBO. No, Andrew did a very misogynist stand-up comedy act.
Yes.
But he was playing a character, and the character he was playing was a kind of East Coast, Long Island, New York asshole. And these guys are real. They're one of the types in America. In fact, there's a famous guy who had this is true, famous piece of American crazy scandal news. A guy had his penis cut off. Joey Buttafuoco.
Yeah.
Hey, yo, hey, Joey. And that's sort of the kind of guy Andrew used as his stand-up comedy character. And he was huge, #1 comic in America.
Yes.
And he did a hosting job on the famous Saturday Night Live show.
And it was the problem,
I think one of the great actresses on that show just didn't get his comedy, and she protested, and it became a big scandal, and that kind of hurt his career. They identified him as anti-feminist, and he's not. In fact, he was just playing a character, but he sort of had the last laugh because the last time I saw Andrew, he was starring on his own show on HBO, and the last time I saw this actress, who I love, she's quite wonderful, but the last time I saw her, she was doing a toilet cleaning commercial on television.
Okay, karma is a bitch, yes. And yes, and 2008, zombie strippers with porn star Jenna Jameson, who killed people from her pussy with a pool ball. What the fuck was that?
Alpha, Bravo teams. Let's clean up the rest of the mess.
Wait for it!
In this small Nebraska town, a secret government project has gotten out of control, and a deadly virus has been unleashed
The virus is based on the human X chromosome, so it stays more pure from woman to woman.
into the city's hottest nightclub.
This is Jessie.
Local girl, right?
Yeah, born and bred, Sartree, Nebraska.
So tonight, when the sun goes down, things really start to heat up. Now, every man's fantasy is about to become
What seems to be the problem, Doc? Believe it or not, zombies.
their worst nightmare. Robert Englund, Jenna Jameson,
Either got it or you don't, baby. But what about the girls, huh? They're good girls.
They're zombies.
No. They're strippers.
They're zombie strippers.
For my sake, suck it up.
Tell me about it. It was great, crazy film.
Well, you know, I was lucky. I didn't have to wear any makeup. The girls were wearing all of the disintegrating zombie makeup, and they were constantly being touched up. I just did that for fun. You know, it was it was close to home, and I knew the location. It's this old abandoned hospital, and it just sounded like fun. I met the director and his sister, and their father was a famous screenwriter, Asian screenwriter from the 1950s, who'd done one of the biggest Broadway musicals, and it also became one of the most expensive Hollywood musicals ever made, Flower Drum Song. Very famous. And the stage actor that still lives within me really just wanted to kind of hang out with them and meet their dad and see where they
So
live.
not for Jenna, you didn't take it
Well,
for
I
Jenna
no, I
Jameson.
did, and in fact, at the end of the movie,
Nancy is very far.
Yes,
you can tell
okay.
me. No, Nancy is very. You can tell me.
At the end of the movie, I had to go back and do some dialogue dubbing, and it was Jenna and I, and we were in the same green room at the sound studio with John Mayer, the rock star, and Axl Rose and Janet Jackson. So imagine all of us in the same room.
Yes, yes.
But Jenna was a sweetheart, and she had to work so hard because she had to wear the makeup and, you know, do the pole dancing, and she's great. So she's in all the scenes. She had to work a lot harder than I do. But what I remember most about Jenna, not how beautiful she was and not how hard she had to work, but Jenna had the coolest Range Rover car I've ever seen. It was all pearlescent, custom gloss white, and she had white wheels with beautiful rims, and she had her windows kind of smoked beautifully, you know, so you couldn't see in, and it looked kind of like a really great surfer car for a rich kid, you know. And I just remember every day I'd see her drive up in that, and I just loved her cars so much, you know.
Okay, and now before we end this crazy interview, I must mention one of my favorite new movies by you, Last Showing.
Watch people. Spend years looking down on them, observing what makes them laugh and cry, be shocked or scared. I decided I was going to make a horror film using real people. We must give the audience what they want.
There's this guy. He's got a camera. He's watching us. He's locked us in here.
What guy?
What's with the camera? We are making a film.
I'm sorry I fired you.
You didn't fire me. I quit.
Where is she? How am I supposed to play your sick little game if you don't tell me where she is? Just let us out there, please.
What are you doing?
You see, every horror film needs a victim.
Please.
My day, horror was all about what you didn't see. That was scary. I'm so pleased I cast you. You look like perfect leading man material, and her, she's the girl next door. Got to have something to fight for, right? Presto! We've got a film.
I'll play along. I don't even think any of this is real. I'll pull this trigger, and your whole game will be up. Ow! Please, ow! I've done something so terrible.
This is.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite.
Yes, this is very great. You played some old film nostalgic, who works in modern cinema theater, and you hate all the young guys who don't respect old school movies and that, and you start to kill them. So this is really good and underrated film, and I must ask you, why this movie didn't do more success? It's really grateful, really great film.
I think it will eventually be discovered, a lot like another great film I did, which is called Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
And Hatchet, my favorite.
Behind the Mask, though, is deconstructed horror, and it's a great film, and I'm really proud of it.
I got it.
Yeah.
Rise of Leslie Vernon, yes.
But last showing, I think the problem was the title. In America, we don't say that. We would call that the midnight movie. The movie you go see on a Friday or a Saturday, Rocky Horror Show, something like that. The midnight movie. And I play the old projectionist. And the symbolism is that he likes the old horror movies, but also he knows how to run. He loves the cinema. He knows how to run the digital movies, but they want him to take classes, and he doesn't want to go back with the young kids, with their pimples on their face and their millennium attitude, and learn about digital projectionists, because he loves the chemistry of the real film and cinema. But he also knows how to do that anyway. He does it better than they do. And they are going to retire him prematurely. The English say remainder. They're going to remainder him. And while he's waiting for his retirement pension, they're going to make him work in the snack bar in a paper hat that's the color of this microphone, and a vest. He looks like he's a road worker, and he has to sell the popcorn. And of course, that's a symbol too, because in America, popcorn also means kind of fun entertainment. And so they make him work there. And he's not allowed to run the projector anymore, and he breaks into the projection room, and he's decided to work the midnight shift, the late shift, and shoot, and he's going to lock the theater because he knows all the technology of his beloved movie theater, and he's going to privately kind of keep these midnight movie attendees hostage, and he's going to make his own horror movie.
It's great that. And we're gonna go back to the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, because we're gonna show this film after we finish this interview. We're gonna play this film on our television called Arena TV, and you can say hello to our viewers, mention Arena TV, and invite them to watch this fucking classic.
Hello, Robert Englund here, aka Freddy Krueger. And I invite you to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, OG, original gangster, the original one on Arena. Sweet dreams.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door.
5, 6, grab your crucifix.
9, 10. 7, 8, better stay awake.
Stay up late. 9, 10.
We're gonna do
Never
this interview
sleep
again.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Englund, it was really nice to meet you. Really nice to talk to you. I'm not scared anymore. I was afraid to fall asleep, but I think I can now.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing up last showing.
Yeah.
And I also encourage audiences to see Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon,
Great.
and check out Season 4, Stranger Things.
Yes, you were season 4 Stranger Things. Yes. Look, I got this. This is from my brother. Yes. Look, and
Am I on this?
yes,
Oh, that's
yes,
Tim Curry.
yes.
Oh
Wait,
my God! It.
wait.
It.
Look.
Oh, there, I just saw a pin, and here I am.
Yeah, here you are.
Here I am.
Yeah, here you are.
I'm everywhere. I'm in your dream.
He's fucking everywhere. He's the reason I didn't sleep for 10 years. You're the reason I didn't sleep for 10 years.
Get them when they're young, own them forever.
Yes. Ok, thank you. In dame in gospodje, to je bil Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger. Jaz sem čist iz sebe in bilo je fantastično. Hvala lepa. Now, pictures and be finished. Okay.